Hey, are you ready to grow your business? You have checked out the number one resource for business leaders, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and managers. And we're going to teach you how to grow and scale your business with real actionable steps. There's no fluff in this podcast. It's just good advice. Check out this episode. If you're a first-time listener, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you enjoy this episode, leave us a 5-star review. Today's episode is with Radon Stancil, who's the co-founder of Peace of Mind Wealth Management. You can find out more at pomwealth.net, and also you should check out their podcast, the Securing Your Retirement podcast, available on every podcast platform. We talk about entrepreneurship, and more importantly, we talk about having those great customers, those right customers, who not just understand your business, but who love genuinely working with you. We're going to be talking about that more on the episode today. Stay tuned. Here comes your good advice. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. We're going to be talking about wealth today, and we're going to be talking about how do you really secure your financial future. And I don't mean this in some kind of, feels like I'm about to pitch you something or sell you something, but I talked to a lot of different business owners who ultimately the reason they started their business was they were trying to find another answer to financial freedom. You've seen all sorts of stories if you've been following the news on pay and really which direction the economy is going. You're probably thinking, how do I stay on the right side of this? How do I make sure that 10, 15, 20, even 30 years from now, that I'm in a position where I feel confident and comfortable that I'm taken care of, and more importantly, that my family is taken care of. Heck, that's why I started my business, was I wanted to give better answers to my children and to my wife and to my family. Well, today we're going to be talking more about that today. I'm sitting down with Radon Stancil, who he's the owner of Peace of Mind Wealth Management. We're going to be talking more about this today and sharing you some good advice. Radon, it is so great to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Hey, thank you so much, Blake, for having me on. I appreciate it very much.
Well, I have to mention, and I'm sure this will come up at some point, but Radon, you have your own podcast called the Secure Your Retirement Podcast with your partner, Mers Tariq. I have to mention it only because, first of all of my listeners, you need to hit pause and go check it out. But two, it's rare that I have a guest on the podcast who has such a great microphone quality as you do. And so it's just a nice relief to be able to hear someone on the other line.
Yeah, well, I always enjoy talking to other folks who do podcasts as well. So this will be fun.
Well, so I'd love, I gave sort of my take on what you do. I'd love to give you an opportunity to share a little bit more about who you are and what your business does.
Well, just to give a brief background, I was raised in a family that had a small business, and my dad was a little bit older when I was born. He was 52 when I was born, and so I was raised by this man who had a small business. I ended up working with him. It was a heating and air conditioning business. I ended up taking that business over and operating it. And we ended up getting an opportunity to make a transition out of that particular company. And then I was kind of like, what am I going to do? And where am I going to do next? As far as I didn't really want to go back in and do heating and air. I just wanted to try something different. And I transitioned from heating and air over into financial services. And I really kind of went into it saying, all right, I'm going to give it 90 days. I knew I could always work. I could always fall back in and do heating and air. Mm-hmm. But I said, I'm going to try something different. So I got over into this financial services, started out pretty much in insurance. And then I said, man, I like this a lot. I was working with people that were close to or already in retirement. Very similarly, most of my clients that I have today, our dads, not moms, but dads are the same. We're the same age because my dad was much older than me. And so I said, I like working with folks that are, getting close to and living in retirement. And so I decided to go back to school. I got my certified financial planning certification and grew a business out of that. I've been doing this now for 20 years. Wow. And who we work with are individuals that are within about 10 years of retirement or already in retirement. And that has a whole set of planning things that we have to go through, but it's a very, very fun group of people to work with.
You're talking about, and I think this is interesting for many of my listeners who, many of whom who haven't necessarily started their business yet, but they've dreamed about it, they've thought about it. You're talking about essentially totally swapping industries. I mean, you were in one industry, you changed to something that isn't remotely similar, but you found this energy about it, and you found this excitement around, I really like this. I'd love to hear more about what was it that made you say, yeah, I think I can do this, and I think I want to do this. Because some people who are listening, the idea of doing something that isn't what they've always done can be a little terrifying.
Well, I would say if I go all the way back, a part of it was I didn't want to crawl in our houses anymore. But, the reality was the things that you do for people were in this industry, what I deal with are kind of, it affects people for the rest of their life. And so I just thought, man, as I kept learning and kept growing, and everything, you start working with people, and what you have to help them with is something that for them is very overwhelming. But because you've gotten expertise in that area, it's somewhat simple to you, but you are actually helping them through something that's life-changing. I use this as an example. I would never do my own taxes, right? But there's CPAs who love doing taxes. That's what they love doing. So what's relatively simple and fun to them is hurtful to me. I don't want to do that. And that's what I'm in right now. I'm in this position of being able to help people with something that is complicated and scary and all those kind of things, but we help navigate them through that and truly do give them peace of mind. So I saw that, and that was such a wonderful thing. And we've built a lot of great relationships, different than what you do when you're working in somebody's house and you put a heating and air in there, and then, okay, you don't see them for 10 years, really. It's just not that same kind of, back and forth. Mm-hmm.
So I take it that your business, and which, by the way, for our listeners, if you're already starting to think about Radon's business, you can go to pomwealth.net. I should have mentioned that earlier, pom.wealth.net. pomwealth.net. Radon, I get the impression that a lot of your work is very collaborative with multiple touch points. I assume that you're developing really strong relationships with your clientele. Is that an accurate assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. We're very, very, very much into the relationship. And our hope is and desire is that we have relationships with people for 20, 30 years.
It seems like in this conversation of really securing your future. And by the way, I really like the name of your podcast, Secure Your Retirement. It feels like there's a lot of noise out there in the sense of what I should do for my finances, and for better or worse. But you have people who, they have their favorites that maybe they listen to on the radio, or it almost feels like there's just so much conversation around how do you really make sure that you're handling your finances well. In your case, how have you tried to be the thought leader in this area? How have you tried to be the person who is giving good advice on this is really the direction that your clientele should go? And naturally, the people who know you and work with you, I'm sure there's a lot of trust built there where you just do well for them. But for someone who maybe doesn't know you as well, how do you approach your business, and how do you approach really giving someone security when it comes to their finances?
Well, what we decided to do quite a few years ago is not try to be all things to all people. And what we decided that we were going to do is we had our belief system. We had our belief system behind how we thought we wanted to invest, how I thought I wanted to have my money managed. I'm somewhat conservative. I don't want to take a tremendous amount of risk. And so we decided that we were going to work very hard and be very clear about what we were and who we were, and try to only attract those people. And so I would say that our clients who are attracted to us believe this simple statement: I want to make a decent rate of return, but I don't want to lose so much of my money if the market crashes. And that's kind of how we've structured the whole thing. So if somebody comes to us and they stumble upon us on the internet, or they get in touch with us by being a referral, whatever it might be, and they start asking us to do things, or they start talking to us about doing things that we don't do, we're very quickly going to say, hey, we can maybe give you some ideas about where you might want to go, but that's not what we do. You're not going to be happy with us. It's not going to be a good relationship. We're at a point in our firm that we will not take a client on if we don't think we're a good fit. And that has made our life a lot easier. Going back, when we made this decision, we would take on somebody and say, hey, why don't you try us out? Maybe it's a different philosophy. And those relationships just didn't work that well. We ended up having to separate. And we were the ones who would say, look, this isn't working because we don't believe that you really believe the way we believe. And so somebody comes in and goes, hey, I really want to go out and buy, Bitcoin or whatever. And we don't do that. That's not what we do. That's a different thing. That's not something that we're involved in. We're not trying to go find a company that's a startup and try to get that. That's our job, we believe, is to make a decent rate of return and not lose so much money. That's our message that we say over and over and over and over. And then the people that come to us, that's what they believe and that's what they say. So we have great relationships.
Was it hard at all to be a bit more selective with your clientele? And I don't mean selective in the sense of, certain people aren't good enough to work with you or anything like that. But exactly what you're saying is that, being incredibly mindful about who is our right customer. And this feels like a concept that's hard sometimes for new business owners, but especially people who are more entrepreneurial, because, naturally you want to, as a business owner, you want to secure as much revenue as possible. You want as much stable cash flow as possible. So the temptation is to take every customer you can, every client you can. And so I think there's a nugget of wisdom here in what you're talking about, where you're being mindful about having the right customer, the right client. Was that a hard decision at all, or did it just make things so much simpler right away?
It was very hard. When we first started out, we were exactly what you said, which is, you didn't want to turn away anything. You wanted to have any client that would be willing to work with you. You wanted to work with them. And I used to talk to others that were like mentors, if you want to say that, and had been around for a while. And they told us this concept, taught me this. And they said, look, you have to set this up, and you may have to tell somebody they're not the right fit. And quite honestly, by the way, when you tell somebody they're not the quite fit, they start wanting to work with you more. And so we would take people that way a little bit every now and then. We would give in. But what they would tell us is, these mentors is like, look, if you build your business and you have these clients, you're going to be irritated. They're going to be irritated. You're not building a great business. You're building something that's going to feel much more like agony going to work. So it took us a little while to figure that out and believe it. But once we started going, okay, this is what we're going to go for. And we didn't do it perfectly. I would say today we do it really well. Even going back 10 years ago, somebody would come in, and if they had the right assets and I thought, okay, they could be a good client. Maybe we'll try to see if we can't figure out how to make this work. And it just doesn't. And so once we figured that out and we got it clear in our head, now, I don't have a client that they call up to the office and say they want to talk to me or my partner or come in that we dread seeing. We have been able to now get our client base where if anybody says they want to come in, anybody says they want to have a conversation with us, we're kind of happy to get on the phone with them, because we know that it's not about we're a bad fit. It's maybe a question, or I'm thinking about redoing the kitchen. It's fun stuff. It's not a drain on us, and that makes us more productive.
When you do have those potential customers who they aren't the right fit, but they want to believe they can be the right fit eventually, do you ever have advice that you share with them that helps position them better to be an eventual customer? I'm even thinking of people who are listening to the podcast who they get excited around the idea of having so much stability with their finances that they could partner with someone like yourself. Obviously in a short podcast, I'm sure there's not the light bulb moment that you could share that now everyone has totally revolutionized their finances. But I am curious, when you have that person who is really hungry to be in the right place, what kind of advice do you give them? What kind of insight do you share with them?
So for clarity, I guess what I'm saying, somebody's not a good fit, usually their investment philosophy doesn't match ours. Okay. And so there's not really anything we're going to do to train them on that other than this. So they might say, okay, I want to buy, let's say I want a stock picker, somebody who's going to pick individual stocks and go find me this thing that's going to, make massive amounts of money in a short period of time. and people get caught up into looking for that. And so, or here's one other one. They are a huge do-it-yourselfer. They've done it themselves for 25 years. They're now kind of just trying to get a second opinion, which is fine. We're just real clear about the fact that, what we offer is not stock picking. We are going to help you. So, it's not really training them. It's just letting them go through life. And then sometimes those folks come back in 3 or 4 or 5 years and they go, hey, you know what? I've been listening to you. I've been following you. I've been hearing about what you do. Because one of the things that we do is every single week, we've been doing this for 9 years. Every single week, we do a little video every single week. Now it's every Thursday. Used to be every month, but now it's every week. Every Thursday, we shoot a little 5-minute, 6-minute video, and we tell exactly how our portfolio is doing, exactly how we're managing the money. We open it wide open. And so we've had people who goes, I've been listening to your videos now for 3 or 4 years. And now I get it. I'm ready to become a client. Okay, great. They've lived through some events and, a pandemic or something like that says, hey, I didn't like seeing my money drop 34% like it did last year. So I understand what you guys did because we're fully disclosing out throughout that whole process, what we're doing, how we did, all that kind of stuff to everybody. And so they go, okay, I get it. I want to work with you guys now.
I like that, the power of transparency with your customers, because it almost feels like in today's age, especially on social media, there's so much, I'm trying to get the phrasing, people who really like to present themselves as the experts. And so it is a bit of the Wizard of Oz, like you can't see the man behind the curtain. Or I can't show you the, how the sauce gets made, so to speak, unless, we're working together on a pretty explicit basis. But it feels like there's real power in people like yourself who are incredibly open and transparent. And that line of communication feels like it goes a long way with your customers. So you're doing the video on a weekly basis. You have the podcast as well, the Secure Your Retirement podcast. You're doing things that I think if more business owners were doing, they'd see a big return on their business. How did the podcast come about?
So it was something that we had talked about quite a bit. We do a lot of live presentations in our local market. And then when the pandemic hit and we were, not able to do the live presentations, we decided to hit a couple of topics hit a couple of things that we wanted to do in our business. One of those was reconstruct our website. The other is to be able to have fresh, authentic content for our clients that would be of benefit. And we decided to go down this path of doing this podcast. We just did, I think, episode 73 just launched. And so since September, we've been doing 2 podcasts a week. One is an interview. One is an educational one that we do every single Wednesday. And I will tell you that has been the most talked about, the most helpful of anything we've ever done for our clients. We actually take the podcast on our Wednesday podcast, which is the more educational one. We have that turned into a blog article. And then we have that turned into a LinkedIn article. And then we have that turned into about 4 or 5 different social media posts. So we take that one piece of content and we kind of explode it out there. Mm-hmm. That has been extremely helpful because we know, by the way, we also then redo it a little bit and we have a YouTube channel that we've taken that same content. So same piece of information, but put it in different platforms. So we've got people who love watching the video. We got people who want to read the article. We got people who want to listen to the podcast. So we're trying to hit people and give them the information in whatever way they want to accept it. And it has been great. We've done a lot. We just had our 3rd book come out just this last week. And so it goes out on Amazon in July. We just got our printed copies. So the more information we can feed to people and just educate them, the better that builds the trust. They actually know who we are. Most people come in and they kind of go, yeah, I know your dad's 52. I know you're from Dunn, a little town in North Carolina. They kind of know our story. Mm-hmm. They know about my partner, Merce. They know that he was born in Pakistan and now he's moving here when he's a little baby. It was here. And so he knows that they know that story about us. And then they come in and they already feel they know us.
Well, and dealing with something as precious as someone's finances, that trust has to be there in some way. And you've just nailed another really great insight that I think some of my listeners are should probably go back and listen to that soundbite again. And it's, how the heck do I create content? How do I have time to create content? And something you've pointed out is really, I think of good content creation like a sponge, in that you create a piece of content and then you look for the 50 different ways to wring it out into other pieces of content. So how the podcast becomes the YouTube video, the LinkedIn article. I even had one of your episodes up, and you have tweetable quotes that can even get tweeted out. Which, by the way, for people who are listening, you really need to check out this podcast. There's 2 episodes in general. First of all, people come on the podcast and they don't always have an actual podcast. This is a real podcast. You can check it out. It's getting updated, like Radon mentioned, twice a week. One episode that you might want to check out that I really like is Dean Ogden Grill Like a Chef. So tips on grilling the perfect steak, which I think is really nice. But getting back to wealth management, the most recent episode that's been posted, and of course, when this episode goes live, you'll have to dig for this. But how to know your advisor is not a Bernie Madoff, which I think is such an appropriate and also a bit funny topic to listen to. So you're creating content that's relevant, you're creating content on a regular basis, and you're sharing a really great insight that is, how do I create content and then get the most use out of it? So I appreciate all the ways you guys are becoming thought leaders and really building that trust with your clientele, which I know it's not easy work, but the consistency piece is, I think, really valuable. Have you always been consistent to the 2 times a week process?
Oh, for sure. Since we started it,
wow.
We committed. And so we started our podcast last September of 2020. And then the video I was telling you about that we do, that has been going on for 9 years. We've not missed that. It used to be once a month. We went into the pandemic. We made it every single day because everybody was nervous, and we backed off, and now we're once a week, and everybody tells us they love the once a week thing. And so one of the things that we have learned is that consistency in how you deliver content, again, breeds confidence, number one, but people know that it's coming. So they don't have to, it's not like all of a sudden it showed up and you got to tell everybody that everybody knows exactly what our process is. Mm-hmm. We have an email that goes out every single Monday that tells you about the Monday podcast. We have a Thursday email that goes out that tells you about our video update and the Wednesday podcast. We have an email that does what we call a weekend wrap up that goes out every Saturday morning. And that email basically kind of wraps up the whole week. And so we've been doing that now for some time, and everybody's kind of like, they just kind of know that it's there, and it doesn't irritate people. We've asked, is this too much? We have asked, do you want to go down to 1 email? We actually are going to, by the way, nobody has said they want to go down on the emails. They're good. They like the information come at them, but we are going to give people the opportunity, if they just want the weekend wrap up, that they could just get that 1 email. Because we know that sometimes email could be irritating. So we just want to give them the option and let them pick. We've not done that yet, but that is coming, to let people kind of segment themselves into 1 email or continue to get the 3.
I think this is a refreshing take from some of my listeners who they're thinking about that content game. And I think a lot of times we put incredible pressure on us where every post, every piece of content has to be totally world transforming. And not that you ever get on a microphone and half-ass it or just kind of pitter patter about, but the thing that feels more important is this consistency piece. I mean, you've mentioned the email that goes out every Monday, every Saturday morning. I do a newsletter every Monday morning. And the only reason I do it is because my dad, for his business, would do an email. And the way he described it was, I just send it so they know I'm not dead yet. Because he's in his 80s, and I just think it's a great concept. So, Radon, unfortunately, we are out of time today. You've given so many great insights, not just on your business, but also what other people can be doing for their own business, which that is the heart and soul of this podcast. So, it's been great to get your perspective. What can people do who want to follow you and connect with you? What's the best way for them to do that? And then maybe even work with you? What's the route they should take with that?
I think the best place is just to go to the website, which is pomwealth.net. You can go see the blog there. We have a blog page. We have a podcast page. So, and then if the person is wanting to look at how we talk about managing money, if they look to the right of that page, there's an online class called 3 Keys to Secure Your Retirement. They can go. That's completely free. We don't charge anything for that. And it's, kind of walks them through about 30 minutes of what to think about when it comes to planning for retirement.
Great. Radon, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, for our listeners, I'm going to put a couple of those links down in the episode description below so that you won't miss it. Again, you need to check out pomwealth.net and then also check out the podcast as well, the Securing Your Retirement podcast, available likely anywhere you can listen to a podcast. Also, hey, if you're enjoying the podcast and you haven't liked and subscribed and followed the podcast, what the heck are you waiting on? Click that follow button to keep getting good advice wherever you are. And also don't forget, if you enjoy the podcast and you want to support the podcast, you can go to our Patreon. It's patreon.com/good advice, where you can support the podcast, even have your business promoted on the podcast. Both of those are available on that website, patreon.com/good advice. Hey, it's been a pleasure. So happy we could share you some good advice today, and we'll catch you later. See ya.